Hi, I'm Karin Hurt, and I'm here with our next edition of Asking for a Friend, and here with Jacob Morgan. And I asked Jacob to join today because of this question. I thought this is the perfect person to answer this question. I was facilitating one of our leadership development programs, and we were talking about trust and authenticity and vulnerability. And this guy raised his hand and he said, I really don't feel comfortable with any of this. I don't want to have to be vulnerable at work. And of course, ironically, he was being incredibly vulnerable at that moment and having that conversation. And I know how I responded in that moment. But I thought, you know what? Let's talk with Jacob, who has a brand new book out on leading with vulnerability. Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, tell us a little bit about your book and what motivated you to write this book.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a lot that I can talk about with it. So as you mentioned, the title is called Leading with Vulnerability. I interviewed 100 CEOs and surveyed 14,000 employees. And the whole premise of the book was to really answer this question of, is vulnerability for leaders the same as it is for everybody else? And going one step beyond that, the basic question should be, is vulnerability in our personal lives the same as it is inside of our organizations? And the truth is that it's not. I think all understand the value of being vulnerable in our personal lives with our friends, with family members, spouses, significant others. There's not a lot of a complicated dynamic there. It's what creates trust, relationships. It's what gets you to want to spend time with the other person. But it's not just that easy in your personal or inside of our work lives, inside of our organizations. So in your personal life, yeah, you can oftentimes just say, I'm really sorry, I made a mistake, I need help. You can talk about your feelings and your emotions. But we have to remember the dynamic that we have inside of an organization. So that dynamic in that relationship is basically the company needs help. It needed somebody with a certain set of skills, like Liam Neeson from the movie Taken. And because the company needed somebody with a certain set of skills, you had those certain set of skills. And so you got the job, you got hired for it. Now, if you show up to work every day and you keep talking about your challenges, your struggles, your mistakes, your feelings, why you weren't able to get something done, what's going to happen is the people who brought you in are going to say, wait a minute, maybe you're not the right person for this job to begin with. So the different dynamic is that inside of an organization, we have deadlines, we have a hierarchy, we have structure, we have pay and benefits, we have customers, we have employees. It's not the same as it is in our personal lives. And you can imagine if you're a leader of a company, it's also not the same for you because now you're actually responsible for the lives of other people. You are responsible for the dollars and cents of the business. So the way that you should be thinking about and approaching vulnerability is not the same as it is for everybody else. And this is one of the things that interviewing these 100 CEOs was able to pinpoint. They shared these stories with me. Let's say, for example, you show up to work, your boss gives you a project, you mess up. Being vulnerable is showing up to work and saying, hey, you know what? I know you gave me this project. I'm really, really sorry I messed this up. Vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Leading with vulnerability is, I know you gave me this project. I'm really sorry I messed this up. Here's what I learned from the mistake that I made. Here are the things that I'm going to do going forward to make sure that mistake doesn't happen again. Mm-hmm. That's vulnerability plus leadership. Mm-hmm. And I think that is it's a very crucial distinction that we need to make, because I think inside of a business environment, purely being vulnerable can actually cause more harm than good.
Yeah, it's the leadership, it's the vision, it's the confidence, it's yes, we can, and this is how, and bringing all that to the table once you're given some disclosure of what's going on. I thought it was very interesting that you have 5 different styles of vulnerability superheroes. How did those even came about? Because I came from, you must have through content analysis of all these interviews and you started to see trends.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the things that I talk about in the book is that leading with vulnerability can transform you into this amazing superhero. And so there are 5 types of superheroes. One of them is Captain Heart. Captain Heart is the person who wears their heart on their sleeve. They're as authentic as you get. What you see is what you get. They're transparent. It's just, this is who I am. You get what you get. And we know a lot of people like that. We might work with a lot of people like that or have people like that in our inner circle of friends or family members. Then the second one is wonder worker. Wonder worker is somebody who's comfortable with being vulnerable, but around all things work related. So they can talk about challenges and mistakes at work and anything in kind of a business environment, but they're not as comfortable talking about things on their personal side. Now, the key distinction I think here is it's not that they don't do these things, it's that it's not their comfort zone. So just because you're a wonder worker doesn't mean you will never share anything personal about yourself. It just means that that's not what you prefer to do. You're more comfortable in the work related area. So that's who wonder worker is. The next one we have is professor personal, and professor personal is someone who is more comfortable talking about life outside of work and being vulnerable about things that are happening outside of work. Again, doesn't mean they never talk about work stuff, but oftentimes they'll use personal lessons as a way to explain work lessons. They'll talk about things going on in their personal life as a way to maybe inspire people inside of the organization. So professor personal. Then we have somebody called super situational. Super situational is a very dynamic type of vulnerable leader where they adjust depending on who they're talking to. So I might be talking to a peer and I have a certain vulnerability comfort level with them. Then I'm talking to my boss and maybe I'm not as comfortable with them. So you adjust your vulnerability dial depending on who you're talking to and depending on the context and the circumstance of the situation. And then there's balanced beast. I'm kind of the balanced beast character. And balanced beast is basically somebody who's pretty equal across the board. Like, it doesn't really matter who I'm talking to, if it's a good friend or if it's somebody that I work with. My comfort level of vulnerability is usually pretty the same. And it's that I'm not super vulnerable with anybody, but that's just, I'm trying to get better at that. But that's kind of like, I'm middle when it comes to vulnerability, and I'm like that with everybody across the board. So those are the different types of superheroes. Each one has their pros and their cons, but they're all superheroes in their own way.
Yeah, and I like that, because if somebody is saying, this isn't for me, or this is for me, or I've tried it this way and it didn't work out, and you break it down. And you can say which of these feels more comfortable to you, and it gives you some pros and cons about it. So highly recommend people take a look at this book. Very rich, very research-based, and extremely practical, which is what we're all about over here at Asking for a Friend. Tell us a little bit where people can find more about you.
Sure. So there's a separate URL just for the book, which is leadwithvulnerability.com. And we did a cool thing where if people they order a copy and they send me an email to bonus@thefutureorganization.com, I'll send them 5 of the CEO interviews that I did and a bunch of other cool stuff. And it's available on Amazon, wherever you can find a book. My personal website is thefutureorganization.com. And my email, if people want to reach out, is jacob@thefutureorganization.com.
Awesome, Jacob. Thank you so much for being on Asking for a Friend.
Thank you for having me.